Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar from A to Gen Z, a title that Sean came up with that we're both really proud of. So my name is Jackie Weissar, and I'm the Senior Communications Specialist here at Capture Higher Ed, and I'm joined by Sean Hill, our Senior Content Writer, who's done a ton of research on Gen Z, and we're both so excited to be here. I'm a millennial and Sean is a Gen Xer. So we'll be talking from two generations about the new generation. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. So all attendees are in listen-only mode, which means you'll be muted during the presentation, so we can't hear you talk, don't worry. By default, audio is played through your computer, and if you would prefer to join over the phone, just select telephone in the audio pane and the dial-in information will be displayed. You will have the opportunity to submit awesome questions to today's presenters by typing your questions into the questions pane of the control panel, which is located on the right side of your screen. So you can send in your questions at any time during the presentation. We'll collect these and address them during the Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. All right, so that's kind of all that housekeeping. We'll go ahead and get started. Let's see here. All right, so I'm going to start by giving you all a game plan so you know what to expect from this webinar. So Sean's going to take the first half of this webinar. He, like I mentioned, has done a ton of research on Gen Z and who they are. So he's going to start with a higher level talk about Gen Z, who they are, to make sure we're all on the same page. He's going to discuss what will make Gen Z really want to go to college. And then I'm going to come at it from a more logistical, tactical standpoint and talk about the ways that the communications department here at Capture has really worked to communicate effectively with Gen Z. And then at the end, I want to ask what you all do, what everyone listening has done to communicate with Gen Z, and open the floor to questions and make it a conversation. The overall theme of this webinar is change. So that's really important to say to start out. This is not a hard science. It's fluid. Our audience is changing, and can we evolve and change with them rather than trying to make them change? So let's just all learn together and make each other better. So now I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Sean.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you all for coming. So we're going to start here with a quote by Dr. Jean Twenge, and she's actually a psychologist and she's a professor at San Diego State. And I would invite you to Google her name because you can learn quite a bit about Gen Z, some of it controversial, through a lot of the studies she's done. She's written a book about Gen Z. She's done studies about them related to smartphones, a lot of stuff that's been pretty well known since last year especially. So this is a quote from her in which she says, "The aim of a generational study is not to succumb to nostalgia for the way things used to be, it's to understand how they are now." I chose this quote and wrote about it because it really has a lot to do with college. In all my time at Capture, and I've been here for close to 5 years, a lot of the things that we've wrestled with is the fact that colleges have a tendency, not always, but to kind of work from an older mode. There was a time as far back as the 60s when colleges could just throw open their doors and expect people to apply, and they could pick and choose. And that's just simply not the case anymore. So all the methods that worked for colleges back then just also don't work anymore. What we're dealing with now is an entirely different type of individual. So what we're going to begin with here is to take a little poll, and that'll pop up in just a second. And the question is, what is Gen Z? Who is Gen Z? Take a second, fill out what you think is correct, and then we'll proceed from there. Tally up the results.
I feel like we should have had the Jeopardy song for this.
Yeah.
Ooh, you guys are doing well.
Okay, looking good. Okay, the poll is now closed. So here's the results. Now, 2% of you think it's people that are as old as I am, and that's flattering. 2% think that they're as old as Jackie is, and that's probably flattering for her as well. But
Thanks, guys.
yeah, 96% is pretty much dead on. So in part, yes, Gen Z is going to be from 18 to 21, and even more importantly, they're going to be all of the kids, most of the kids that are younger than that. So what you're going to see on your screen now, we're going to play you a video. This comes from Time Magazine. Dr. Jean Twenge will actually be in this video saying a few things. So let's watch this. It's a brief video, about 2 minutes, and this will give you a little background about Generation Z. Okay. So that's a good introduction. And one thing that'd be good to point out, because it strikes me right off, is you saw the young man talking, and let's talk about the young man's father. My daughter was born in 2009, which puts her right at the end of Gen Z. So one thing to know about Gen Z is that the parents are actually Gen Xers. And because of this, the Gen Xers who were raised by the baby boomers are still kind of a very cautious generation. We've been through a lot. We've seen 9/11. We've seen the economy rise and fall. And in a lot of cases, and I'm definitely one of these, we've expressed this to our children. So the Gen Zers are not like the millennials. The millennials are the 1980 to 1995 generation that falls in between. The millennials are almost more like the Gen Xers in the sense that when they were children, there were rotary phones, and there was things like cable television and whatnot. But whereas the millennials were slowly introduced to technology, this new generation, it has always been a part of their experience. So a couple quick points about Gen Z. And I should say too that a lot of this material is going to be available to you at the end of the presentation in a book that I wrote for Capture about Gen Z, which is a 65 million strong population at this point. And by 2020, this group will account for 40% of the US consumers. So you see kind of different numbers as to when this generation was born, and some will say 95. I believe the Pew Research Center says 1997, some will say as late as 2000. But what's important is that the kids who are in high school right now are Gen Z. The kids who are applying to your college, they are Gen Z right now. So back in January, we had a conference here, Capture's first conference. It was called Resolve. And to me, the most important speaker was Ryan Jenkins. And I'm going to draw on some of his data right now and some of his own research and tell you a little bit about Gen Z. So on this screen right now, you can see some simple facts about Justin Timberlake and the fact that phones have gone from things where you put your finger and turn a dial to basically a computer that you hold in your hand. My daughter is completely able with iPads, iPhones, computers in general, searching the internet, and she's just turned 9 years old. Modems, all that kind of stuff. Note down there that men have always shared romantic smooches. Well, they know this because they're online, and because when the kids get online today, they are seeing a world of injustice, prejudice that they really just have no patience for at all anymore. And in the long run, this actually gives me hope because I think we're going to see this country grow quite a bit, and a lot of it is probably going to be because of Gen Z. So I'm going to give you 4 big factors that Ryan Jenkins says really define Gen Z. And the first one is that the majority is younger than the age of 20. So like I said, again, they're in high school at this point. The second point is that whereas the young man said they are digital natives, and that is a term that Ryan Jenkins used, they're also digitally dependent. So the entirety of these kids' universe, and this is a worldwide phenomenon, is really online. Now, Dr. Jean Twenge will say that there are problems with having an iPhone on all the time, and the kids themselves, the teenagers today, will say that they're seeing such problems. but at the same time, there's a huge boon to having this technology at your hand, and it has everything to do with the way kids view college. So later we'll look at things like Uber and Airbnb and the kind of ease that this puts Gen Z in getting things what they want right now. I saw an article today too that we'll share at the end. It's from Business Insider. It's good to know that the kids get 62% of their news not from the television news, but from social media. Netflix and Hulu is their main choice of television. They do not sit in front of the old-fashioned TV anymore. They want stuff when they want it right now. They can zoom through the parts they don't want to watch. They think TV is, quote, outdated, and it doesn't have content that suits their interests. The third factor Ryan Jenkins points out is that this is the first true global generation. So there was a study done where adults reported predominantly that the kids today have more in common with a kid on the other side of the world than they do with adults in their own country. The kids are linked in with people around the world, and this makes it an international generation. And this is going to have a profound effect as well on everything from international students to just the changes we see in the future. The fourth point, which is probably the most pertinent to college, is that the kids are continuous learners. So what this means is the high school kids today, and the video sort of pointed at that, and some other things we'll share at the end will really talk about this, is the kids do not see the office that the father talked about. They don't see a 30-year career as something not only viable, but something that's even desirable at all. These kids see change happening in their lives, and they want to learn new things when they want to learn them. The thought of going to school for 4 years, and this is where the audience for Ryan Jenkins at our conference all found their hair standing on end, is that the kids don't want to go to school for 4 years to work a job for 30. In fact, they don't even want to sit in a chair for 4 years at all. They want to learn what they want to learn right now. And I've used this many times over, but the Gen Z in me is the part of me that explores photography. Now, I could go and sign up for a university and go for maybe 2 to 4 years and get a degree in photography and learn how to use that. Or I can do what the kids are doing, which is I can just go to YouTube. So let's talk about some of the online things that the kids are doing. So Uber, Airbnb. Well, what's that doing for Gen Z? One is it's easy. When I was in San Francisco for my vacation, I don't have to hail a taxi. I can get on my phone and there's going to be a car at my house in 7 minutes. In fact, one of the friends I was staying with says if they don't come in 7 minutes, they get annoyed. Same thing with Airbnb. I can avoid a faceless hotel room, the Holiday Inn, all of which are going to look the same. And I can have instead an experience that is authentic. So authenticity is a huge value for Generation Z. They want an experience that's going to be entirely unique and, more importantly, unique to them. Teen Vogue magazine is something I talk about in my long-form content that you'll see at the end. This is a magazine that's worth looking at because they have their finger on the pulse of Gen Z. So recently, MTV found that their bracket 18 to 24 audience over a period of 5 years between 2012 and 2017 fell by 50%. Now, MTV is what the millennials grew up with and what I grew up with. Well, what happened? They weren't responding to Generation Z, who first of all doesn't really care about watching television. So they began making a lot of changes. If you remember the MTV Music Awards, instead of the Moon Man Award, they changed that to the Moon Person Award. They began having a variety of acts performing, whether it was Pink or different rap artists talking about social injustice for blacks. This is what Generation Z wants to hear. And when MTV began doing this, they had a new Gen Xer come in as the president. Their primetime ratings actually went up 31%. So Teen Vogue is a good one to look at as I write about my long form content about Snapchat filters. Snapchat, Instagram, and YouTube are the 3 biggest platforms for Generation Z. In fact, I learned from a younger person that it's easy enough to learn about photography by going to what he called, and I now call, YouTube University. Here's a couple quick facts too. 43% of Gen Z want a digital learning experience, which means they think the internet is the easiest. They can go to YouTube and learn anything from anybody in no time at all. 63% want entrepreneurship to be taught, and that is related to their value of self-empowerment. And 72% want to design their own majors because, again, these are continuous learners and they know what they want and they know what they experience and they know how to shape that. So a couple other quick numbers. 65% of the youth entering school today will work jobs that do not currently exist. If you think back, if you're a Gen Xer like me, or if you're a millennial, think about how many things we now have at our disposal that are simply did not exist at that time. It's only going to increase. 67% of Gen Z says their top concern is affordability, and this is documented in a lot of different research. As far as value propositions for communications, this is probably number one. And 75% of Gen Z says there's other ways of securing education rather than traditional college. There's a lot of on-the-job training, whether it's Google or any of the tech industries, that to the young people today, that's learning to work instead of college, which they see as working to learn. If this is going to take me 4 years and slow me down, I'd rather just go right into the workplace and begin to figure it out. For Gen Z, career, the whole concept is out. They want roles, not jobs. 76% want their hobbies to be their jobs, and when they look at YouTube, they see people doing this. They want face-to-face interaction when they're talking to you. 53% want that. So we're going to cover some of the things to deliver, and Jackie's going to take that. High-value content, videos and infographics, college is an experiential purpose, or sorry, an experiential purchase, and why that's so important. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jackie now.
Great. Thanks, Sean. That was super interesting to hear about. I like hearing you talk about that generation. Cool. All right. So like Sean said, he's done all of this background research and higher level research on Gen Z, which is incredibly insightful. And then I'm kind of on the other end where, okay, I get an assignment for a college to write emails for email marketing, or to write some ads that are going to pop up on the school's website. And so how do I take that information that Sean has gleaned and use it to effectively communicate with students in a new way? So that's what I'm going to talk about today, just how to do it and some of the things that Capture has been doing. I started working at Capture about 4 years ago, and we've really evolved in the communications department in regard to how we communicate with our audience. And I put together these bullet points. I kind of went through all of the efforts that we've made to change, and here they are, kind of in a succinct format. This is what we've done. So, again, the main message is that we're evolving. We're still going to evolve after this webinar today. Here's where we're at now. And my hope in sharing these things is to inspire and help you continue to evolve too. So here's the bullet points, and we'll go through them in more detail. To communicate effectively with Gen Z, you need to be authentic. You need to use student voices. You need to communicate visually in a lot of ways. You need to encourage the student to get connected through your social media. You need to focus on that affordability message. You need to meet the student where they are and with what interests them. You need to get to the point quickly, and you need to try new things. So that's kind of what I'm going to talk about today. So as I start and go through these, I want to say that, as we're communicating with students, it doesn't matter if it's students that we want to join an online program at your school, or a traditional undergraduate program, or transfer to the school. If they're Gen Z, these are kind of the main methods to communicate with this group of students, no matter what you want them to do. And I also say, before I start with this first example, that you need to use a variety of these things. I don't want you to start using videos in every single ad and in every single email. That won't be effective. It's about using a variety of things and catching the student off guard and catching their attention. That's what matters. So I'm going to start with my first point, and that's be authentic when you're communicating. So you'll see here and on the following pages examples from our email marketing emails and from our ads that we put on your school's website, of ways that we're doing this. So I put in quotes, don't be cookie cutter. So I put that in quotes because a few months ago, the communications department talked to a school on the phone, and they said, we're working with you because we don't want to be cookie cutter. We don't want you to produce emails for us where another school's name could be put in and it would still make sense. We want it to be unique. And that really does matter. I read an article recently in Forbes that said Gen Z doesn't want anything that isn't real. They want to know the brand and the person behind the email, behind the camera. I read an interesting study that in 2014, American Eagle clothing brand implemented a no Photoshop policy, and they saw sales go up as a result, which I think is a kind of a good example to show students they want real. In the past, when I started working at Capture, our emails that we would send to students all focused on the same 7 topics that we got from a Stanford University study. So the topics were academics, award, affordability, community, belonging, outcomes, and opportunity. I remember sitting with Sean on my first day at Capture and going over those and talking about them. And then we would talk to schools and say, how can we make you fit into those topics? What can we use from your school that'll go into those topics? And now we've completely changed our strategy. And when we have communications calls with clients to talk about what we're going to do for them, we say, what are 5 to 7 points of what makes your school stand out? What's important to you? What makes you distinct? What's something that no one else has? And we develop our communications based on what they think is important, not what we think is important. So yeah, this is an example for one of our clients, Drew, who came to us, and the bullet pointed list shows the kind of the 7 points that were most important to them. You know, they said, our location is so amazing. We're close to New York City. You're not going to get an advisor. You're going to get someone that'll really mentor students. We have all these crazy experiential learning opportunities. You're really going to make connections between your classes. They're not going to be isolated. You'll get career development in and out of the classroom, and you're going to be able to go into the community. So we developed a first email with all those points. And then as you'll see on the right, we focused in each email on one point specifically and talking about it and offering the student a link to learn more. And most importantly, which leads into my next point, we had a student talk about each point. I talked on the phone to Olivia and I asked her, does it really matter to you that Drew's close to New York City? If it is, what have you done? And she told me about her semester in the United Nations in New York and what a difference it made in her life. And that's not cookie cutter. No other school could have this email. So that leads into my next point. Use student voices to tell your story. If you're using students to tell your story, they're influencers, and that's the voice that students really want to hear. And there's no other school that can use your students' voices. So it's another way to not be cookie cutter and to be really unique. So here are some examples of emails that have done really well and of ads that have done really well where we talk from a student perspective. This one on the left is a note from Jake Myers about why he goes to St. Michael's and why he thinks it's worth it for other students to check it out. This had an incredibly high open rate because students want to hear from other students. Sometimes, like on the right, you'll see that we do student quotes with an image and show their face. Sometimes schools have really great videos where the student's just talking. And the one in the bottom right, Ian Richards is talking about St. Michael's and his academics, but also his mountain biking skills. And that's what students want to hear about. They want to hear from each other. And here's the second slide, because I couldn't even stick to just one for this. Here are some more examples. Sometimes we put student stories in more of a narrative form where we paraphrase some of what they said and then use some powerful quotes and link to things they talk about so students can learn more and get more information. And next, I want to talk about communicating visually. One of the main ways that we can do that Sean talked about too is communicating through videos. A study by Adweek and Defy Media says that over 95% of Gen Z uses YouTube regularly. And the study also asked which popular platform could a student not live without, and 50% of those students said YouTube, which is pretty amazing. So we need to be incorporating videos into our email marketing, into our ads that appear on your website, because that's what students want to see, and it does the job for you in a way. So here are some examples. You'll see on the left a video that talks about the approach to learning. So rather than telling a student, here's what you'll get in your classes, let's show them a video where other students are talking about it. And on the right, you'll see a fun video we did for University of New Mexico on peak mountain biking season at this school. Like, that's something I'd want to click about on, and that's something that a lot of our students are clicking on too. It's a different way to tell a story and a different way to communicate the information. Another way to communicate visually is through engaging graphics, something that Capture has been doing a lot with. That image in the bottom left was used in an email marketing email for one of our schools, and it had triple the normal open to click rate. It was way above average. I could have written out that information in paragraphs, but it probably would have been confusing what the Polytechnic blend was. This is a way that the student can see the information in a new way. All these graphics are clickable. It's just a new way to tell your story. Okay, this is one of my favorite ones, communicating visually through emojis. This is something that we've been really working on doing more. Emojis are a visual shortcut. They emphasize a topic, and they add humor and playfulness to what you're discussing, which is what students want when they're going to open an email or read an ad. According to one report I read by Experian, 56% of brands using emojis in their email subject lines had a higher unique open rate. So that's great. So that, the first example at the top is a subject line that we use. It's almost time to apply to UW Stout with a clock at the end. It's something that's going to catch their attention in an inbox that's full of subject lines. You can see other examples there of ways we've used emojis within the body of the email. That first one is a personal favorite. Worked pretty hard on that, not kidding. So, it's showing that academics and that affordability are going to make the student happy and elicit an emotion. So those are just some of the ways that we're using them. Another way we're communicating visually is through eye-catching images of students. Once every 2 weeks, the communication department has started hosting these meetings that we call Baby Einstein meetings. And in these meetings, we have a qualitative analysis of what we're producing and how it's performing. And we look at the items that are performing the best and the ones that are performing the worst. And one of the major insights that we've really gleaned from these meetings is that no matter what, images that show students are the ones that do the best. So here are some examples of some good ones that are just really eye-catching. I love Grace College's images. They have so many students doing fun things. Same with Sweetbriar. They just have images that catch your attention and make you stop. So when you can, rather than showing an image of an academic building, show one of students in front of the academic building doing fun things. It really does make a difference across all of our partners. It really does make a difference. Yeah, and here's one that's we're doing more and more now. We're communicating through GIFs, which stands for graphics interchange format, in case you really wanted to know. But these are images that rapidly display a series of pictures to produce the illusion of motion. We've been putting those in our emails. We've started putting those in our popover ads that show up on a school's website. And I made 2 of them move for you. I thought 4 might cause a headache, but here's 2 that show, they're moving. That's going to make students stop and say, what's going on here? It's going to catch their attention. Brands like Anthropologie and Nike and Steve Madden and BuzzFeed are really using GIFs in their marketing efforts. And why can't we, as schools, why can't we use those same things too to talk to the same audience? So that's something we're really excited about and something we're having a lot of fun with. Yeah, and then like Sean said, it's really important to remember that these students are all about social media, and so we should encourage the student to get connected with your school through social media. So we can send them emails and we can send them ads, But we should also use these emails and ads as tools to get them to connect in a different way through social media with your school. So there are some examples there. You know, we had an email for St. Michael's where we really encourage students to connect with the school's social media accounts, and we created a collage that shows different images from the school's Instagram. There's another example for NHIA of the main social media accounts they use. We also create social media packages. So when a student takes an action that we want them to take, like when they fill out a request information form showing they're interested, we'll send them a social media package that has cover photos and things they can use for Facebook and Twitter and wallpapers for their computer. So it's a way of meeting them where they are and giving them something that they can share with their friends and their peers too. Yeah, so while a lot of things have changed in our messaging, one of the things that's really stayed the same is our focus on affordability. So we always put messages about affordability and financial aid first in our emails. Students are worried that they're going to have student debt, and this generation does not want that, and they want to know how they can go to your school but also not be trampled with tons of debt when they get out. So that message is really important to share up front with students, and we see again and again that these messages do the best and have the best email rates. So there's an example on the left there of Grace College in the top of an email we did for them. See that little emoji in there too. And on the right is an example of an ad that's been running for NHIA for a long time, where we say, you know, you can afford this, and we show what the tuition is for NHIA compared to some competitors the school might be looking at. That's a bold thing to do, but it's really worked. So I wanted to be sure to include it. You can see another example below that of just some email content where we have a bulleted list from a school, UW Stout, about why students should go there and how they're going to help with the cost. One of them is that their textbooks are rented rather than purchased. You can get a laptop at no additional cost. And those are things that really stand out to students and make students click and say, okay, all right, I get that. Now I'm going to learn more about your school. It's worth it to me. It's worth my time. And then the next point is meet the student where they are. One of Capture's products and tools that we use is Capture Behavioral Engagement. And the idea behind Capture Behavioral Engagement is to give students messages based on their behavior. So we've started to give this generation messages based on what they really are acting on and showing they're interested in. So we're not saying, when this student took the ACT 3 years ago, they said they wanted to be an engineer. We're saying no. Okay, the student might have said that, but now they're going to 7 nursing pages. So we're going to deliver them an ad when they go to those pages from Bellhaven saying that we're still accepting applications for our nursing program. On the bottom there, you'll see an ad that was on one of our school's websites for international students. So when students are coming to the website from international IP addresses, they're getting this message saying, hey, we know who you are. Here's another student who is from another country who's done well here. Why don't you learn more about us? So we're getting to really know the student and speaking to them based on what they care about, which is what they want. And an appropriate, almost last side is get to the point quickly. I feel like this isn't quite as fun to talk about, honestly, and it's flashy and creative and new as some of the other slides, but I thought it was really, really important to talk about because we see so many schools who want to send the students so much content, and we get that. Sean and I get that. Like, from our generation's perspective, we get that. You know, I was a journalism major and I would like to make the emails like 7 pages long. I loved reading Rolling Stone articles that were 6-page narratives with every quality of a band member. I like that kind of thing, but that's not what this generation wants. And that's hard for us to capture, and it's hard for you at the schools. And it's something that we really need to work on more. So I have, you know, some examples of ways to just be very simple and direct in the content, get to the point quickly, and bold the keywords and phrases so that a student could get through the main points of your email and get the point. That's what you want them to do, get the point quickly. So, you know, you'll see on the left an email from the University of Kansas. If you look at the email quickly, you'll see I need to make it official and register for orientation. I get it. The links go to submit your enrollment deposit. Okay, that's what I need to do. If I want to, I can also watch an engaging video. So you need to get to the point and quickly, and we together as communicators trying to communicate with this generation need to realize that, and it'll really help us in the end too. We don't need to spend our time writing more. We need to spend our time writing smarter, and that's really important. Yeah, I have this statistic from Forbes that the average attention span of a millennial, so me, is 12 seconds, which means it's amazing I've made it through this PowerPoint presentation. And Gen Zers attention span is 8 seconds. So don't waste your time producing pages and pages of content. Get to the point quickly. So I'll wrap up with the last key slide, which is to try new things. And that's kind of my call to action for all of you. We've done a lot of research, and Sean has done a lot of research on who this Gen Z audience is. And now our job is to try new things and experiment and evolve and change. On the left is something that we started doing recently that we haven't done until recently. You know, we always had templates that had images and social media links, and we've started to try doing plain text templates that are really simple to see how those have done, and so far they've done really well. In the middle is an example of Cumberland's. This was so outside of our comfort zone. We did a meme to really catch the students' attention in a new way. We also have created Spotify playlists for students and guides to college for students saying, you know, if you take this action, let us send you a music playlist to help you while you study. Something that students really like, and that's fun for us to make on our end too. This last one is something really new that we tried that was really different and out of the box. For Drew University, we said, okay, you know, just like any school, there are some students who aren't opening our senior emails, but they are going to your website and interacting with those ads. So we put an ad up on their website saying, how much in scholarships could you get from Drew? We'll check your email. And then we sent them emails asking them and giving them more information. And those emails led to more than 500 students who had never opened an email before opening it. So sometimes you'll be really successful in those new pursuits, and sometimes you'll fail, and that's okay. Both teach you something about how to communicate effectively. So those are the main things that we're doing, and we want to hear from you, and we want to hear any questions that you have too. So yeah, let's check it out. Sean, are there any questions?
There's the first one. Can I throw in a couple last thoughts?
Yeah, of course. Go for it.
Because as Jackie was talking, I got a couple insights. And when she mentioned trying to figure out what's special about your school, you don't have to do that. Just ask the students. So in Teen Vogue wrote about what are called Snapchat geofilters. They are emblems for a college that go on Snapchat that are designed by students. They do it, and then through that geofilter, they communicate with prospective students. So the prospective student will simply go to Snapchat and look at other students and see what they say about it. I want to throw in just a couple quick things too before we go on to the questions that I kind of left off. That'll be a good summation. Is one, learn what an influencer is. And an influencer is a peer that these kids trust, not a celebrity, not a sports star. YouTube is full of influencers, and so is your school. The kids shop online predominantly. They're going to be online. That's why all our communications are heavily focused on the internet. These kids don't waste their time. They have what's called an 8-second filter. If you can't catch their attention in 8 seconds, they're moving on. And that goes with videos, emails, or whatever. These kids, since day one, have been building a personal brand. They've probably had social media set up since the time they were, you know, in elementary school, and with a lot of kids, that's the case. And then finally, and this relates to a question we'll get to, these kids are kids who want to have an impact on the world, and they're concerned about what they see as the future, about 1/4 of kids between 16 and 19 actually volunteer. So that's something to think about. So let's go to these questions. Jackie, this first question is definitely made for you.
Yeah, let's see. So it says, do you know what impact emojis, graphics, etc. have on going straight to spam? So a few things that we have learned as we've started experimenting. First of all, we've learned that an email should never be just image. It needs to include some copy and text, or it causes spam issues. The other big thing we've done is we use a program called Litmus, which is available online. And whenever we have a new email, we send every email through 2 different types of spam tests. So we look at every email in different preview modes, how it's going to look in Gmail, how it's going to look in Outlook, and we see if there's any critical issues that are going to cause it to go to spam, and we make changes as a result. I was just editing an email today where, you know, the image was all messed up in some of the views, and so we said, okay, we're going to have to look at this and change it. I edit emails where Litmus tells us, you know, the subject line isn't going to work. It contains the word free, or it has too many symbols in it, too many exclamation marks, and we make changes. So it's something that we're learning from, and that's a key resource that we use to make sure that we're delivering things that are going to go to a student's inbox.
Okay, so here's a second question. I'm already spinning just thinking about this. How do you recommend focusing on affordability without lessening the value of the investment? So the investment of college, right? So the question that follows that is, well, who's defining the value of the investment? Is it you or is it them? Now, as a parent and as a former teacher, I totally understand, you know, the fact that we want the kids to know certain things. But if you think back to when you were a teenager, didn't you just hate it when people thought you were dumb or you were just a kid? And I heard that both when I was in high school and when I taught high school. So as I mentioned here, a statistic, a lot of kids volunteer. That's the value of college. A lot of schools we worked with have had Black student unions. They've had special clubs for lesbian, gay, transgendered kids. That is the new normal. I think I just read today that 3% of young people identify themselves as, I think it was transgendered. This number is only going to grow as their culture becomes just more and more dominant, which means more and more accommodating. When the University of Ohio has an office of diversity. Do you have an office of diversity? So the real thing is to determine, again, just as you want to ask the students how your school stands out, ask the students what their values are. They know what's valuable, and they know this because they're linked in with people from around the world. If you can bring those things to the front, then your school is automatically going to be an investment that's going to be worth it. If that makes sense, because it sure makes sense to me. So I would recommend, and I've recommended here as well, that we go into these student populations and really start speaking to them and getting some data back on what their values are and how we can fit those.
Cool. Yeah, we're getting some really good questions in. Okay, so this question is, what are your opinions on how we can strategically plan events that will interest Gen Z students? Should we stick to larger events or move to small, more intimate events? So a few things here. First of all, I think that one of the key takeaways from our conversation today is the idea of student influencers. So students don't want to come to your campus and hear the whole time from your director or from the head of a department. They want to hear from students who they can relate to. So in my opinion, I think that smaller, more intimate events where students can talk one-on-one with others is very important. And I think that word intimate is key, you know, letting a student who's leading a tour really be real with prospective students, telling them about the challenges they might face at a school and the good things, telling them about where they live, telling them about their roommate, stopping during the tour and talking to students that you pass by and being authentic and asking them about their experience and what their advice is and what drew them to the school. So I think smaller, more intimate events that focus on the student and who they are and aren't cookie cutter, like we discussed, that are a different experience and a different visit experience for everyone that comes in is really important. And another thing that I would recommend related to events is asking the students to check in on social media and maybe giving them something for doing that, like a t-shirt. And that way you can influence more students than just the ones that are in front of you. If someone sees that others are checking in at, University of Tennessee, then maybe they'll want to go there too and see what it's like and get interested. And then the last thing is to make your visit experiences digital and technology focused. When they get to campus, give them opportunities to do things on social media and to do things on the technology you have at the school, your iPads and your other devices. Let them take quizzes, let them take pictures, and make it a digital experience as well.
So I'd like to answer this question that I just got shown because it's a great question. So someone wrote, I handle social media for my university admissions department. My school is known for its culture of free speech. Hooray. And with the current climate, it's been growing, of course. How do I show Gen Z we are a safe, open, and accepting campus? The first thing that jumps to my head is, again, just talk to the students. Let them be the shape and the voice to that, which kind of builds off what Jackie was just saying as well. To have these kind of invitations to kids, come down, spend the night with us, have lunch with us and learn about the campus from other students. Well, when they do that, it's a good event to have anyway. When they do that, sit down with them as in small groups as you can and ask these questions, and then take those values with you. And instead of having just the kind of usual view book that you hand out in paper, just take some of these ideas we've talked about and turn them into a table. Maybe you have a screen behind you showing videos. It could be any number of things, but the colors, have other students. In fact, that's a good answer. Just bring other students from the campus. Let them get some internship credit. Let them get some credit, period, and let them do all the talking. I really think the influencer thing is huge with Gen Z, more than it was for us who grew up with, cold commercials with actors sneezing and stuff like that. These kids want to hear from each other, and let them kind of handle some of that for you. I think that would really work.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thank you all for all of your insightful questions. It's really fun to kind of think through those things. And thank you for listening to this webinar. Sean and I, really care about this topic and helping to engage your students. So we appreciate you listening in. I'm going to be sending a follow-up email tomorrow with a recording of our presentation so that you can listen to it every day forever. If you have any questions, please feel free to respond to my email. We're happy to talk more and continue the conversation. This isn't the end of the conversation. That's what I'll end on. Things keep changing and this isn't the end of the conversation. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.